Hi, everybody. Rich Gibbons with SpeakInc, and today we are here with organizational psychologist Nick Tasler. Nick, good to be with you.
Rich, great to be here.
Yeah. Nick just got off a platform. How many people were in the audience?
Like 280, I think.
Yeah, it was a good crowd in the healthcare arena, and really great. I love sitting in the back of the room and seeing when you're making a point and you see chins go. Like it's resonating, and the cameras come up. So
I love that too.
You were, of course. You were very, very engaging, and they were very connected. For those out on the intertubes, explain two things.
Okay.
First, give like a 20-second CV, just so they know your background, the arc of your experience. But also explain to somebody like they're in 7th grade, like me, what is the difference between a psychologist and an organizational psychologist? I can guess, but
that's a great question that I have never been asked before.
So I come up with wonky questions.
Let me see if I can come up with that. All right. So you had two questions. The first one was what is my CV? Yeah. Okay. So I'm an organizational psychologist. What I studied in undergraduate, what I studied in graduate school. Actually, fun fact, there was no such thing as organizational psychology back in the 90s for undergrads. So technically, my degree is in psychology and business, which I think is telling as to what an organizational psychologist does. Right. So it's like psychology and management. Now, there's every school in the world has an organizational behavior, organizational psychology degree, right? So an organizational psychologist is like, it's like psychology for what I like to say is normal people. Right. So like, like it's not.
You're not dealing with dysfunction.
It's not abnormal psychology. It's taking normal people. I hate that term. Sorry, scratch that. Normal people, right? We're all normal, but it's like taking, not curing psychological ailments so much as like taking people and bringing the best out of them in a business organizational context.
Right. And then just the quick CV, like a backdrop on your practice. You have authorship?
Yes. So I've written 5 books. My first one was in 2008, was published. And then I've written 4 more since then. My most recent one in January. And I've been doing this. So I started out doing management consulting, and then worked for a boutique company here in San Diego, where we did like emotional intelligence training for corporations. And then I've been on my own since 2009.
Yeah. So the thing I loved about the content, and I would say they fall under the general rubric of it intersects beautifully with how do we as Homo sapiens think about change. We can find it very threatening. But what I loved about your approach is essentially, and this is sort of layman's speak, but hey everybody, this is how your brain responds to the threat of change. And when you lift, as a clinical professional, when you lift that hood and say, the Johnson rod connects to the folliculator, and this is why this happens. And when we as humans understand, oh, that's why I feel that way, it's very empowering to the individual. It's like, what can I do to combat with paralysis or You talked about the once you rise to a loftier station, you feel like you have more to lose.
Something to lose.
Right.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Right. So it's kind of like, I talk about the first voice and the second voice. Okay?
Yes, right.
So every time we reach the top of what I like to call a growth curve, it just basically like we've experienced some success. We've tasted success in our life, in our career, in our business, whatever, and things are good. But then change comes in and it threatens us. Now, when we're like at the bottom of the totem pole, change is not a threat. It's an opportunity to get better. It's an opportunity to increase our station.
Right.
But when we have increased our station, now it's a threat that we're going to lose it. Right. And I could bore you to tears with all the research on this, but it's loss aversion. There's all kinds of behavioral psychology research that shows that like we pay 3 to 5 times more attention to the negative aspects of a situation rather than the positive aspects. And it is like universal, whether we're talking about your husband or your wife, whether we're talking about your kids, whether we're talking about your job, your boss, you're going to latch on to the negative rather than the positive. And we think we're being realistic. but actually we're being unrealistically, irrationally pessimistic, right?
Yeah.
And so to your point, Rich, I think the big epiphany for people is to just realize, A, it's not rational to think this negatively.
Right.
And B, it's normal. It's not rational,
right?
But it's normal. Like, you're not deficient. There's nothing wrong with you for having that impulsive response.
Yeah.
The only thing that's wrong is if you just like fester in that response.
Wallow in it.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that about the ratio of emphasis on the negative versus the positive, and at the risk of being too evolutionary about it, that was selected for.
Totally.
I remember talking to a scientist who said, if you were out in the savannah and you missed a food source or a source of clean drinking water, like it didn't affect the trajectory of your life that much. But if you missed the apex predator hiding in the grass, that was a big problem.
That's right. Yeah.
So that those people who were a little bit more sort of dandelion pickers, kind of not paying attention to the negative, they got weeded out of the gene pool.
Yeah, for the most part. Now, interesting thing. My first book, The Impulse Factor, we're going way back in time now, was about that. And what we know actually is that it's mostly true, but there's like 1 in 4 people, and not just people, fish, monkeys, and all kinds of species that have this more like, we'll call them the dandelion pickers, like you said, right? That actually survived because they're...
But a little bit more Pollyanna, optimistic, and almost to a fault.
Exactly, right. But it's like when you step back, for the good of the whole community, they were necessary. Some of them. Right. A lot of them got weeded out.
It was herd health.
Yeah, but some of them were necessary and they survived, right?
Yeah.
But the majority of us are that like risk aversion is what helps you live.
Yeah, right. You have to have your antenna up for the threat. Right. But it can spiral into being somewhat paralytic.
Exactly. And it's not good if you're a salesperson, if you're a leader. But I mean, just take a manager, for example. So it's like, if you're constantly focusing on the negative, you might sidestep some landmines, but that means that also you're overlooking the potential of the people that work for you. Right. You're zeroing in on this one thing that they're not that good at, and you're completely overlooking the fact that they can close deals, the fact that they can get so much done, whatever, and you're like, but you showed up for late for work that one time. Right? And so it's like, it's not good for organizational health.
Right. You need to have appropriate emphasis.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So what would you say for lots of different audiences out there, and certainly it seems like the big arenas for change, how we lead. Mm-hmm. I love Nick used a number of different examples in business on how our natural tendency can lead us this way, but once we're aware of that pothole, that pitfall, that stumbling block, we can sort of recalibrate and reframe how we think of this. Like, I love that. Just give them a little taste of the, what was it? Was it hug?
Push and love.
Push and love. I love that.
Well, so this is the beauty of it, Rich. So it's like, we can talk about how evolution has primed us to focus more on the negative and what we might lose and whatever. But the beautiful thing about being human and having a human brain is we are not like helpless victims to the first impulse. We have that impulse, but once we recognize it, we can dial it back, and we can counter it. We can use our beautifully crafted frontal lobe to overcome it and start to see the potential, right?
Yeah.
And so in a leadership context, it's something that I learned from this former executive from Walmart. He said, the best lesson that he learned from his 40 years of leadership is that the greatest leaders will push you with one arm, and then they will love you with the other arm.
Right.
And so now, as the organizational psychologist, I stack that up against all the research, and it goes by a lot of different names. We call it like authoritative parenting, coaching, teaching, all these different dynamics from all these different types of research. We find that
on your slide it was enforcer.
Exactly. Right. So the best leaders, managers, coaches, teachers, and parents all have one thing in common. They hold people to high standards, and they give them high support. And a lot of times we think it's one or the other. You think they're like mutually exclusive.
Right.
You can be the, you can be the tough guy or gal, and like, I'm constantly holding my people's feet to the fire, right? And that's fine for a little while, but it creates burnout. It makes retention hard.
Right. Or low trust.
Low trust, exactly. Or you can be like what I say my default is, you can be the coddler. And I'm like, you know what, Rich, it's okay. You fell short of expectations again. But it's okay. Don't worry about it. I love you, right?
Until you get to the breaking point.
And that's right. And then it's like I have expectations of myself and my team, and I can't take it anymore. So then I just totally flip flop, and I'm like, that's it. I'm not putting up with it anymore.
Right. And on the receiving end, they're like, whoa, dude. Grab a decaf.
Yeah, you used to be this nice chill guy, and what happened, right? So the best leaders are the ones that do both. Rich, I'm going to hold you accountable to this expectation. I'm not going to let you get by with that. Because I know you're capable of more than that. I know what your potential is, even if you don't know it. I know it. So let's figure out how we can get you there.
And then support them.
And support them, exactly. Exactly.
Well, in closing, I would say, leadership, change, but above all else, growth.
Growth.
That's right. But I loved, your style on the platform is very sort of warm, fun, engaging. It opens with a hilarious story about ping pong, which everybody was very engaged by, and you were very connected, and a long line of people that wanted to talk to you afterwards, and just spoke about how impactful it was. So I would say for anybody out on the inner tubes looking for, it's around leading people, and by extension, forming effective teams and dealing with change. These are things that if you're in business, all of these things affect you. So,
and I would say too, Rich, it's like it's dealing with change, but it's all in the pursuit. Like the end goal is not just to deal with change. And I'd say this was an evolution in my thinking in the last probably 5 to 6 years of like, I talked a lot about change. I focused on that. And it was always like about resilience. It was about like enduring change. And it was really like some point during the pandemic when I had this epiphany that if all we're doing is surviving change and enduring it, we are missing the boat. Because change, the change that's happening around us, whether we like it, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's something that is expected or not, it's a catalyst for growth in a way that stable times never are. And so it's like, change is a reality, but don't just survive it. Use it, leverage it, take your team to the next level.
Use it as fuel.
Your next big win is coming because of this change.
So, and that was a great way to frame it, and that was woven through the whole talk. So thanks for doing what you do.
Yes, thank you, Rich.
And we'll see where we can get you out there.
Excellent.
Okay, great. See you guys on the next one.
Cheers.